Hi, it's Lorie Brown with Brown Law Office and Empowered Nurses, and I'm thrilled that I have a guest today, Renee Thompson with RTConnections. Hi, Renee. Welcome.
Hi, Lorie. How are you?
Great. I'm so glad to have you on this call. And I'm so excited because you are a nationally recognized expert on bullying, and I would love to hear how you can help nurses who are listening to this about what is bullying and what to do about it. So,
yes, it's an interesting topic to be, let's just say, known as a leading authority on. This whole issue of nurse-to-nurse bullying. But unfortunately, it is very real, and every nurse who has either gone through nursing school and then they've been in practice, they all know the term "nurses eat their young."
yeah.
And it's unfortunate that not only are we eating our young, we're eating our old, we're eating the middle ground, we're eating everyone. And yeah, I spend the majority of my time helping individuals and organizations eliminate this horrible problem because it impacts everything that we do.
It does, yeah. How did you get interested in it?
Well, it was really interesting. I was in a corporate role, so I was a nurse executive, and I was responsible for the professional development of about 10,000 nurses. And I developed a nurse residency program, an internship program. We brought universities to come in to help our nurses advance their degrees. And when I was developing a nurse residency program, I did a lot of focus groups. And I had student nurses, former students, preceptors, newer nurses, and I would ask them questions about what did they need to truly transition into professional practice. All they wanted to do was talk about how poorly the nurses treated them.
Yeah.
And as I sat there and listened to their stories, it reminded me of my own experiences. And it's not just as a new nurse, I mean, as a new educator, as a new manager. And then I remember somebody saying in one of the focus groups, well, that's just the way it is in nursing. And I remember I caught myself saying that too. And then I thought, wait a minute, this is not okay. And I made it my mission to help individuals and organizations stop this problem because it's not okay and it shouldn't be. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, that is so true. And I think I was bullied as a new nurse too, but I just didn't let it get to me.
Yeah.
But now that I think about it, some of the stuff that she said to me or did was really inappropriate.
Yeah, it's disturbing. And I always say, nurses probably reach out to me almost every day, a nurse, and it's a global issue, asking for help. And when they tell me their stories, I find myself being shocked, like, oh my gosh, somebody told me that she was a nurse, it was during the night, and she was sitting in this other nurse's chair. You know what I mean? It was like her chair, her computer. And this nurse came over and she said, you're in my chair. You need to get out of my chair. She said, I'm almost finished. I just want to finish this note. She said, you need to get out of my chair right now. Seriously, I'll be done in just a minute. This nurse threw a cup of water in her face. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And, for me, that's a never event. That's somebody that should be terminated.
Yeah, yeah.
But nobody wrote it up. Nobody documented it. So that nurse is probably still practicing today. But, I say maybe that's a good thing that I still get shocked by, the stories and the examples. But it's horrific, some of the behavior of nurses out there. Nurses can be so caring to their patients, but horrific to each other.
Yeah. So how would you define bullying?
It's the number one question that people ask me. How do I know if my coworker's a bully or maybe just a drama queen or maybe just a jerk? And, because we label bully or bullying to everything. Not everything is bullying. And, I really gave this a lot of thought. And, I really don't think people, as they're walking into work, are thinking, how can I be disruptive today? Like, who can I make cry today? Well, there might be a few people like that, but that's a whole other issue. But I thought, like, how do you really know if your coworker's a bully or just maybe they're having a bad day? Because Lorie, I mean, the work environment that nurses are in right now is so incredibly complex. And, I still practice at the bedside a couple of days a month. Holy cow.
Yeah, I think that's great.
More to do, limited resources. Sometimes we're not always on our best behavior. We can get a little testy with each other. So here's a situation. Maybe you're in a code with another nurse, and the nurse screams and yells at you, maybe calls you an idiot or embarrasses you in front of your colleagues. If your coworker's not a bully, your coworker will recognize that he or she behaved inappropriately and apologize. Hey, I'm really sorry. I yelled at you. Oh my gosh, that was my patient, and I knew this was going to happen. And, because we can all behave in an unprofessional manner.
Right.
If your coworker's a bully, bullies don't apologize. They justify their behaviors. Well, of course I had to do this. She is blah, blah, blah. And they always are justifying why they behave in that way. So the true definition of a bully is when you see the repeated patterns of destructive behavior with the conscious or unconscious attempt to do harm. So when somebody says to me, well, I don't know if my coworker is a bully or not, I always ask, have you seen this behavior before, either directed at you or directed towards someone else? And it has to be destructive in nature. That's a bully.
Yeah, that's a great definition. Yeah, because
it's one of the when you look at bullying in primary school and you look at bullying in non-healthcare related organizations, there tends to be a couple of things that we look for. So it's the pattern of behavior, it's destructive, and generally we see that there's some level of perceived power gradient that somebody has. For example, I'm a seasoned, experienced nurse and you're a new nurse. I feel like I have more power over you. Or I'm a nurse and I feel that I have more power over a nursing assistant. Or I'm a physician and I feel that I have more power over a nurse or anybody else, kind of in that way. But we have this sort of perceived power gradient.
Yeah. So if somebody does feel like they're being bullied, what should they do about it?
Yeah, the most important thing to do is, and this is an important skill that all of us need to develop, is to be able to separate the person from the behavior. And, so somebody, I used to be a unit manager, the nurse would come in and, oh, she's at it again, and she's so condescending, and, she's on her tyrants, and on and on and on. And I'd say, what is she doing that's making you react this way? Like, what is the actual behavior? And you whittle it down until you actually say, well, when somebody said that I was going to be in charge, she rolled her eyes and said, well, there goes, the day today. So you kind of have to drill down to what's the behavior. Somebody rolled their eyes at you. Somebody called you an idiot in front of other people in the middle of the nurse's station. So what is the behavior that somebody's displaying that you believe is inappropriate, unprofessional, bullying, whatever that is? Once you can isolate the behaviors, then you have a better chance of actually being able to address those behaviors. And one of the primary steps that I tell nurses to take is just to start a documentation trail. Yeah. Lorie, you would be surprised, and I know we're going to talk about some of the legal aspects of this, but you'd be surprised how many nurses have been in a bullying situation, some of them for years, and yet have never documented their experiences with this person or people. So I teach nurses how to document, dates, times, verbatim comments, to be very objective. You keep your opinion out of it. You don't say she's been after me for years. She's jealous that I have a bachelor's degree and she only has a diploma, and all those things. You keep all of that out. Yeah. Sort of, dates, times, facts. And I also really encourage nurses to speak up. Yeah. Start engaging in conversations. One of the reasons that bullying continues is because we all use silence as a strategy. Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't work. Yeah. But what if you're, whoever you're talking to about the situation says, oh, you're just being sensitive, or that's just who she is, Yeah. Well, it's funny because the number one reason why bullying continues is because we accept the behavior as the norm. And how you know that this is a problem in your organization is when you hear things like, well, that's just the way she is. Don't take it personally. Or, if you have any questions, don't go to him. Come to me because he doesn't like people bothering him. And one of my favorites is, yeah, she's a really good nurse. She's just not a people person. I'm like, how can you make a good nurse and not a people person? That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When we hear those statements, and I will tell you, Lorie, some of that is I look at it from a reality perspective. Sometimes we have to not be as sensitive when people are giving us feedback, maybe on our techniques, on our clinical skills, on our behavior, and on our ability to communicate with each other. That's different than somebody expecting you to grow a thick skin to deal with the abrasive behaviors of your coworkers. That's completely different. And I call those distractors. When somebody says, you got to lighten up a little bit, honey, that's a distractor.
Yeah.
They're distracting you from their behavior, and they're forcing you to now put the blame on yourself. You're being sensitive. So, and I tell nurses, anytime you hear that type of thing, just remember that's a distractor. Just like if you call, I teach managers how to deal with the behaviors of their employees. And when you approach a bully and you have your, conversation about their behavior, and they right away get defensive and then blame you, and I've had situations where managers have said, then their nurses file a complaint that the manager's bullying them by giving them that kind of feedback. All those are distractors. They're trying to shift your focus.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah. But it's sad that nursing is so dysfunctional, that we allow this and that's why it continues. And what are some strategies that we can use to create a healthy work environment?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, here's my challenge. I do full day seminars on this, but I'm going to give you kind of some of the down and dirty. First of all, we need to get leadership to take a more active role in addressing the unprofessional behaviors and disruptive behaviors of their employees. Mm-hmm. I've worked with physician groups too to improve the relationship between physicians and nurses. And you can have a great code of conduct and all these things. The Joint Commission expects all healthcare organizations to have, but I've heard it. Well, everybody has to behave in a respectful manner. Well, except for this doctor, this cardiothoracic surgeon who brings in a lot of money. Oh, well, we're just going to overlook his behaviors. Leadership has to take a stance that is across the board, from dietary to the chief, executive officer to the, neurosurgical, physician to the nurse manager to, the housekeeper. Everybody has to be held accountable to the same behavior. So that's from a leadership perspective. And, I teach leaders, you can't assume people know how to behave. You can't just say, well, we're all going to treat each other with respect here. What does that mean? It means different things to different people. So you have to set behavioral expectations. You can't just have a code of conduct that says, you can't do this, you can't do that, no ethnic jokes, no sexual remarks, you can't have just a code of conduct that tells people what not to do. You have to teach them what to do. How to communicate in a way that's both honest and respectful at the same time. And you need to engage a multidisciplinary approach to this. And you really need skill development for people. You can't expect, especially mid-level managers, to know how to deal with the behaviors of their employees. That's what managers spend 85% of their time doing, is dealing with the behavior of their employees. But we don't teach them conflict management, communication strategies, how to give effective feedback. I do a whole talk on feedback. People are like, oh my gosh, I never knew that. Yes, there's a skill involved. Yeah. And, of course, how to address bullying.
Right. So what if somebody does, you said documentation is number one,
yes.
And they go to their supervisor, and now what if their supervisor is not supportive?
Yeah. This is one of the most painful situations that I get involved in. I'm a big blogger, and I wrote a blog post called, What If the Bully is Your Boss?
Yeah.
And it probably got more views than, it was like one of my top 3, views that I got. And I had so many nurses emailing me saying, this is what's happening to me. It's either my boss or I go to my boss and my boss doesn't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. So there's two issues with this. First of all, I try to remind nurses, don't assume your boss isn't doing anything about it. Because when I was a unit director, I had two of my employees that all I needed was one more incident and I could have terminated them. But because it's confidential, I couldn't tell them. Oh. I couldn't say, I just need one more. Uh-huh. However, most managers aren't doing anything about it because they don't know what to do. Managers use silence as a strategy. Yeah. So what I tell nurses to do, let's say you go to your boss and there's two different ways that you can approach your boss. The first way is, you walk into her office and you say, Tina's at it again. She's being condescending. She's doing this. All your boss hears is blah, 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 yeah. blah. Instead, scheduling an appointment with your boss and then saying, I want to file a formal complaint. I have 6 weeks of documentation that outlines the behaviors that Tina's been, displaying that I believe undermine a culture of safety. So here's the deal, and Lorie, I know you know this. Back in 2008, the Joint Commission came out with a Sentinel alert that said every organization has to have a policy in place to address disruptive behaviors when somebody files a formal complaint. Mm-hmm. So use the language that HR and administration uses, filing a formal complaint, disruptive behavior. I think they've changed the language a little bit. And anytime you can relate an event, a behavior to a patient safety issue, to a patient outcome, that's when you have more of a chance to get your boss or leadership to pay attention. If you can relate it to a patient outcome, because, especially with the Affordable Care Act, healthcare organizations are held to this standard of quality care and patient safety. If your boss ignores you or tells you you're being too sensitive, or worse yet, somebody told me this nurse walked into her boss's office, was telling her about an incident that happened with the bully. The manager got up and went over and said to the bully, hey, Sarah just said that you were doing this. Oh. This nurse was mortified.
Oh, I bet.
Now, what's that bully going to do? She's going to retaliate against.
Yeah.
So, and if your boss isn't receptive, then you go up the chain of commands. You talk to someone about it. And it could even just be an educator to get some support.
Yeah. And, if you were being sexually harassed, you'd do the same thing. So why is this different?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great points. So how could the listeners to this recording find you and read that great blog you mentioned and keep in touch with you?
Well, I have my website. It's RTConnections, and the web address is www.rtconnections.com. And I actually have a newer section on my website, on the toolbar. It says anti-bullying. And then on that, you'll see a drop-down box that has all my interviews, articles that I've written, all of my products related to bullying, the consulting that I do, pretty much every videos that I have about bullying. And most of the information on there is free. And then you'll see my, blog. It says award-winning blog, and, nurses can access that too.
Great. Okay. And you also have some books that you wrote about bullying.
Yeah, my first book, it's called Do No Harm Applies to Nurses Too. And it's all about strategies to protect and bully-proof yourself at work. I do a lot of with scripting and teaching nurses, to use certain scripts to deal with certain types of bullies, and that's always very helpful because sometimes we're caught off guard. We don't know what to say.
Yeah, we don't know what to say.
Say this, if they say that.
Yeah. Tools. Yeah, and I do a lot of speaking to nursing students, and they have no idea that this stuff can exist, so they don't know what to do about it.
They don't. It's so sad. So I'm glad there are people like you and I out there, Lorie, trying to help them out.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for being our guest, and I appreciate it. And everybody check out rtconnections.com, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.